bits that aren't actually code, but I abbreviated it. Just to say, this is boss as in suit, not boss as in best. I'm not claiming to be a React Native developer at all. This is a talk about what it's like to manage a team that's running React Native and what it's like to work in a React Native project, a React Native company, from the point of view of those who are not writing the software. So hopefully it's a different perspective. Again, a bit like the other Tom's talk, it's more about what it feels like to be running these projects rather than actually writing the code. With a slightly different experience to Airbnb and so on and so forth. Calvium is not Airbnb, despite the confusion. No one should ever know. Calvium and Airbnb are different companies. This is me. I'm Tom Melamed. I used to write software. I have been a developer. Now I mostly write emails and documents, and I'm a director and founder of a company. There's no code in this talk. Apologies in advance, just warning you now. I think we'll cover this. So, where do I come from? What's my perspective? I think a lot of the talk on the Southwest Mobile Slack channel that brought this up in the first place was different people have different priorities and different perspectives on what's the right solution and what's the best outcome. Because there are lots of different right solutions and there are lots of different best outcomes depending on your priority and perspective. So I think it's quite handy to state where you're coming from. So I'm one of the founders and directors of Calvium. I'm now the client services director. I argue with customers for a living. That's what I do. We are, I would argue, probably the best mobile agency in a highly unbiased opinion. I do think it's actually true. We are the largest independent mobile developer in Bristol. All the others are owned by big multinational things. So we are the largest in Bristol. We're around 15 people. We're getting bigger. We're hiring. If you want to come and work for a very interesting React Native first agency in Bristol, it's a nice place. Come and talk to myself or Richard at the back. Or even Tom has actually worked for us time to time, so you can ask him what it's like. To get a less biased opinion, maybe. We're a React Native first agency. Doesn't mean we don't do other things, but our new projects, our greenfield sites, are React Native, unless there's a good reason not to. So we're React Native first. So this is what it feels like. As a company, we started 9 years ago. Our first projects were hybrid, in fact building our own hybrid technology and our own hybrid stack. We then realised that hybrid wasn't really sufficient for the kind of projects we were doing, so we added native. We started native iOS, native Android, and then we tried a few React Native apps, and then we really liked it, so we went React Native first, and now we are a React Native first company. So that's where we are. So that's kind of our company history in terms of technology. What I'm going to talk about, this whole talk's quite brief, so I'm going to keep going very quickly and then people can stop me and ask questions again. We're going to talk about the developer experience as seen from a non-developer using React Native, and then what it's like managing developers in a React Native project, and managing projects and managing clients in a React Native way, and how that feels different to the work we've done that's been truly native or the work we've done that's been hybrid, and that sort of thing. So diving straight in, from the developer experience, what are the advantages of being React Native? And I think a lot of this probably is common with Xamarin. I think some is different, some is common, but I think some of it's generally about being a cross-platform company and some of it's specific to React Native. So it's nice to be able to share cross-platform best practices with others. Everyone's working in the same tool set. Everyone's using the same tools, everyone's working in the same chain. So if somebody discovers something really cool on one project or one tool or something, everyone can use it right away. And that, especially when you're a relatively small team, it means you have all those brains all working on the best technologies, the best libraries, the best tool chains. And because everyone's working on the same thing, it makes it much easier to foster that culture. And a lot of it's actually the culture more than technology, that there's no, oh, well, we're the iOS team, we did this, and we're the other did this. There is no teams like that. Everyone's working on that same system. So it really helps to build out that idea of collaboration. Cool. Hot reloading, I think Tom talked about that as well. you can in seconds change something and see it quick, very quick. Especially compare that to early Swift when everything had to be rebuilt. It's a very different world. JavaScript skills are highly valued. If you are a developer and this is what you do all day, then this is a very transferable skills. And you only need to be an expert in one language, and then you can work on everything. Do accounting. There are disadvantages from the developer experience. These are things told to me. So if you want more detail on this stuff, you might pull out another brains for this. But the native devs don't get to keep their skills as fresh. If you see yourself primarily as a native dev, and you're spending all your time, almost all your time working in React Native, then you're not pushing at the forefront of iOS or the forefront of Android. You dibble in now and there and do this piece here and there, but it's not your day-to-day, it's not your core skill. Everyone gets the joy of Gradle, and everyone gets the joy of Xcode, and everyone gets the joy of all the things that are fiddly and annoying from each platform. All the developers now have to be, maybe not experts, but enough to compile and test and check and run those sort of things. And when things do go wrong, and it's not your code, it's often kind of 3 layers and a whole other language away from where you're looking. So when things do go wrong, there is a different level of things that have to go wrong. And then from the employment management experience, there are more JavaScript developers in the world than there are iOS developers or Android developers. And as a team, as you're growing a team, you're not thinking, well, we kind of need 75% of an Android developer, and we need about 30% of an iOS developer, and the next project we're not sure what platforms, and you can just hire a developer. And actually, as a manager, that makes life much easier. And then you can bring them into the development team, and you start to teach them the development tools, and you don't have to separate out different things, which particularly for an agency, where we're working on lots of different projects with different clients, that makes things so much easier. And also JavaScript skills now with Node and the popularity of Node, you can have those people. I mean, there are different skills between front end and back end, there are different technologies, and some people are better at databases than others. It's not like everyone's exactly the same, but those same skills and those same languages and those same kind of coding standards, and some of those people can move back and forth more freely, and actually you're not now trying to manage 3 different teams. Well, I'm the back end team, I don't do front end, I'm not, and all that. You're all one team, you're all working together, and certainly some employees are quite flexible between that, which just makes things so much easier to manage as an organisation. And again, for the devs, then they can move between projects, and they can move, and actually, if something's falling a bit behind, you're not looking, oh, well, we only have 3 Android developers, they're all busy on this, you can start to move things around, set that now. And it's easier for any developer to support any other developer. And this is all builds on a culture of actually a single team working together. So a lot of there's technology underpinning why that happens, but actually I would say the single biggest change is the cultural change, which actually has nothing to do with the language, but it's to do with having a single team all working in the same system. There are disadvantages. There's pretty much no skilled React Native developers looking for work, and you don't really need to have them, because a good developer can move across languages, and a good JavaScript developer can move quite easily into React Native, and a lot of our developers start off as native developers now, so it doesn't need them, but they don't exist. Tom Spencer's a freelancer, he's quite good, it's all right. But there are very few, so that's the thing. And one of the nice things about React Native, one of the things we like about it, is if React Native doesn't quite meet your need, you can drop into native and fix things in native, and you can go back and forth, and that's a nice system that actually to have that backup, that whenever your cross-platform tool is just a little bit too cross-platform, I think as you were saying before, the ability to drop into native makes it much more powerful and much safer as a technology choice. But then now your developers have to know React Native and native, so they have to be more skilled and know more things. Not all of them, because it's only a minority sport, but you need some of them who can do all of that. Something I learned today, I've talked to some developers about this, is Stack Overflow for React Native, according to people who told me this, is quite rubbish, which is surprising because React Native is normally great for everything. And actually for React Native, a lot of people are relying on Medium posts. rather than say overlay, which is a shame. Maybe the community gets bigger, quality will improve. I don't know, but that was an interesting thing I learned today. And then from the project management perspective, which kind of blends into a little bit into client management, it's normally cheaper and almost always cheaper and faster building one platform and then tweaking it, or building one code base, and tweaking it for iOS, tweaking it for Android, than starting blank, 2 sheets of paper, doing the whole thing in parallel. Also means the platforms are always in sync. You don't get this issue, well, it's fixed in iOS, but we haven't fixed it in Android, and iOS is using this version of the backend API, and Android is using this version, and so on and so forth. By definition, they're always in sync, which makes things a lot nicer. We talked about this flexibility of staff. Also, you can bring web development and app development, use those kind of skills in common. Talked about best practice. And because every project is using the same language, any component or library or skill then flows very rapidly into the rest of the projects and the rest of the companies. And you have more opportunity, not guaranteed, more opportunity to reuse components, to reuse things that you've written in-house between other projects. And it's more worth doing that investment on those libraries and investment on those components in-house, because you know whatever platform your next app is going to be, you'll be able to reuse it again. So that makes those investments more worthwhile, more guaranteed and more worthwhile. There's always cons. There's that moment you're 3 days off shipping and you realise that it just doesn't work well enough. And it works, but it's just not. There was one project we had where the scroll list, the infinite scrolling list, just wasn't quick enough. And you don't really get that till you're in full production levels of data and volumes of data and things. And those gotchas, they don't happen that often. They're quite rare, but when they do happen, you are falling into a bit of a hole on that. As Tom said, the cost of keeping up, it is a rapidly moving system. You don't always have to keep up. You don't always have to be on the very latest. But if you're supporting an app over a number of years, you do need to pay that price eventually. You need to keep up eventually. I think varying quality is a polite way of saying some of the libraries. Some of them are genuinely great, but you don't always know till you've started with them how great they are and where you are. And because we do this all the time, we've built a pretty good understanding of some libraries we have pretty good trust in, some we don't use anymore, but it's a different kind of thing. And less of your staff know native, because they're all doing React Native all the time. So in those rare instances where you do need it, it is harder. From the client management stuff, we can pretty much offer a native experience. All the UI components are native, and it's almost always quicker and cheaper than doing this, right? So it's a much easier conversation with the client when maybe you're competing for work or competing for jobs, and your quote is the same quality and just as good, and maybe a third cheaper. That makes my job quite a lot easier. I like that. Certainly when we were doing hybrid stuff, we'd agree with the spec client, agree what's going to happen, agree how it's going to work, and then halfway through the project, or 2 months after the first version or whatever, the client rings you up and goes, I've got this great idea, can this app do this thing, this extra thing? And certainly when we were doing a lot of hybrid work, I would sometimes have to go, no, you can't have that. Because of the technology choices we made 6 months ago, that's just not really going to fly, or that's going to be hugely expensive. And with React Native, I don't need to have those conversations anymore, which is a really nice, for me, very nice thing to have. And we talked about if you're using cross-platform stuff, it's much easier to keep your design common between iOS and Android. Some will see that as a disadvantage, some will see that as an advantage. For most of our clients, it's an advantage. That's a really nice thing. You sometimes have to tell the clients this is going to be a bit harder, or it's going to be a bit tricky, because while React Native has a full native UI, the business logic is in JavaScript, so there's occasional trade-offs on there in terms of performance and things. It's very rare. I can't actually remember the last time I had to do that, but it could happen. A few of our clients want to own the technology, want to own the software at the end of it. And it's a more complicated stack to hand on to them than just a standard iOS app or a standard Android app. Again, that's rare. Some of our clients chose us specifically because we were React Native, and they wanted to then take on the React Native stack afterwards. So that goes back and forth. But yeah, in summary, we're pleased with React Native. It's not a magic solution. We're not looking for an alternative. We're not talking about going back. For our needs and our agency and our way of doing things, it's been a positive change. It's been a good thing. It's not a magic solution. It doesn't suddenly make everything easy. We don't all go home at 2 in the afternoon and go to the pub and everything's done. There is still work. It isn't perfect. It changes the problems you have. Somebody once told me that the best thing you can ever hope for when running a company is to choose what problems you have. You always have problems, but if you're lucky and you work hard, you get a good break, you can at least choose what the problems are. And React Native feels like it changed the problems, and it's problems that we'd rather be solving, these ones, than the other ones we would have had. So for our situation, it's the correct trade-off. But I think as Tom said, it depends on your situation. It depends on what it is you're trying to optimize, what it is you're trying to measure against, success against, that sort of thing. So for us, it's the way. And started with a little boss animation, so I'm going to finish one too. Thank you very much.